For those of you, welcome to the History of Diving Museum. My name is Lisa Mongili. I'm the Executive Director. We are happy that you are here with us tonight. We're also happy for the people that are joining us on Zoom. If you're on Zoom, write in, where you're from and how many people are watching with you. We appreciate kind of reaching out. If you have a question at any time during the presentation, kind of let us know so Mike can address it. If you're on Zoom, you can type it in the chat. Julia's going to be monitoring that, and we'll go from there. We want to thank our sponsors tonight, Hammerhead Marine and the Hazel Baker family. Thank you very much. We appreciate that. We couldn't do things like this. It's free and open to the public. We couldn't do it without the help of our sponsors. So we greatly appreciate that. For those of you that came in late, go ahead and just find an empty seat and make yourselves at home. Are we good? We're going to check. Okay. All right. Julia's going to work her tech magic because that's not my area. Okay. For those of you that are here, the third Wednesday of every month is our monthly Immerse Yourself program. Actually, next month, Dr. Sally Bauer is going to give our 20th anniversary of our very first Immerse Yourself presentation that Dr. Joe made 20 years ago. So we'll find out more about that next month. We look forward, if you're in the Keys, please plan on being here early. It's going to be an evening meet and mingle and then immerse yourself. So we're going to have some snacks and it's going to be a fun anniversary night. That weekend, we are going to have guided tours at 11 and 2 on Saturday. We'll focus on, what it takes to put a museum together, how one diving helmet launched a 40-year search of all the unique things that we have in our collection today. So on September 20th, we will be celebrating our 20th anniversary with guided tours. And we're also going to be having a Zoom presentation from Christopher Steinman from Germany. He actually came in, to work on his PhD thesis, he used 57 books within the library collection to help him to put his thesis together, which, that's what a great use of this historic collection. It's incredible. And he's going to be talking about the development of the Hagenut, the first watertight one atmosphere suit. So that'll be the 20th of September is going to be a really busy day. We want everybody to participate in that. If you'd like to volunteer, please let us know because we're going to be needing some extra volunteers that day as well. So that kind of brings us to where we are tonight. I've known Mike for, probably a dozen years now. Met him at the Commercial Diving Hall of Fame installation dinner. I don't think that was your year, but we shared a table together. And just being around a bunch of those folks is just a fabulous community. And for those of you that are in the room that are recreational divers or maybe not divers, to hear what the commercial guys do and the military, Mike joined the Navy in high school, has been on a submarine, did his little stint, decided, maybe not the Navy, got out for, I think, a quick hot minute, became a dive instructor, and then went, I think I will go back to the Navy and have more fun. Because this time, I'm going to work my way to the experimental diving unit. And after, 27 years in the military?
Well, 21.
21 years in the military, worked for Kirby Morgan, again, played with more new and evolving equipment, and we're going to hear all kinds of stories tonight. So it's a pleasure to have you tonight, and we'll learn more about Dive Lab and your history. So thank you.
Well, this is very humbling. Every time I come down here, I come through the museum, I realize just how much I don't know. I kind of look at it a little different. I don't feel old enough to know enough about the history, so I'm not going to concentrate as much on history as much as the evolution of diving and diving equipment as I know it. I started diving in the early 70s, and after I went in the Navy, And it's one of these things where you think you know a lot, and then after I got out of the Navy, I learned so much more. So I'm going to explain a lot of that, and I'll show you a lot of what we've been doing. But basically, what got me into diving, and probably most people my age, older, or even maybe a little bit younger, of course, was sea hunt. 1958, I guess, and it only lasted a few years on TV. But I can remember I was probably 6 years old, and I had a whisk laundry detergent bottle strapped to my back. So that's where it all started with me. Got a little crazy, but it wasn't until after I went in the Navy that I actually got into scuba diving. I was always a swimmer, free diver, and whatever in the lakes back where I was from. But as far as diving goes, it wasn't until I was on a submarine and we pulled into Bremerton, Washington for overhaul. And I took scuba diving lessons there, got certified, and that was it. I was done. So several years later, I was lucky enough to get out of submarines and get into diving at the second class dive school. And did that for 2.5, 3 years. And then I got out for about 6 months and realized this is screwed up out here. So I went back in. Anyway, so and everything went really fast after that. You don't realize how quick the time goes by. And like I said, I was a junior diver. I ended up came back in the Navy. They sent me to first class dive school, and then after first class dive school, I got orders. I wanted shore duty because I'd been on sea duty all before, and my wife wanted shore duty. So we ended up at experimental diving unit in Panama City. Shortly, it had only been moved down there about 2 years, and we got there, and EDU was still really new. The paint was drying, and the first thing they did, was put you on dives. So we did a lot of saturation experiments and all that. So I kind of got stuck in that routine of experimental equipment. But anyway, that's how I got started. And I look at it now. It's kind of strange in a way. I look at it here, 1873. I bought that poster you see to the left. I bought that over in Portsmouth, England, back in the mid '90s, late '90s. I was over there, and I went in the museum in Portsmouth, and they were selling these posters. So I bought a couple of them, and this is one of them. And then it dawned on me later that that was 1873 in Portsmouth, and they were using surface supply diving equipment, which was pretty much state of the art at the time. Now, helmet diving had started before that, but this was when they first started using compressors that were real efficient, and they could actually do dives around the clock. They salvaged all these cannons over there, and it was a big deal. So it was in the London News. Now I got thinking about it. I said, that's 1873. Well, there's a picture of me in 1974. I was on USS Sunbird, which is a submarine rescue ship. I was about 21, 22 years old, 23 years old. And I'm looking, like you can see the look on my face. What am I doing in this room? But so I was just a young baby diver. I'm a second class diver. And then the other picture to the right, this was standard diving gear in the Navy. I mean, the Navy had scuba, but Mark V was our standard heavy gear deep sea diving. You could dive in the Navy on air. We had to do a 285-foot air dive in the chamber with the equipment in the pot, but we could dive down to 300 feet, mixed gas, with that equipment, which is no different than what you're seeing out back here right now. To the right, there's a Jack Brown. That had been in use in the Navy since before the Second World War. And basically, it was a real simple surface supplied free flow mask. And all you did was you had a thin 1/4-inch hose that fed the mask. There was no communications. It was just an on-off valve. And you tied a line around your waist with a bowline. And I was standby diver. That picture there was taken in Washington, D.C. in Oxon Cove when we were doing a class project in first class dive school. So, and I'm thinking to myself, what am I doing? This is February. If I have to get in the water, look, there's no gloves. But we did have them right there. And I didn't have to get in the water, so it was good. But that just goes to show 100 years, not a whole lot had changed. So I kind of got into it. Now you look here, 1960s and 1970s brought about some changes, but the changes were primarily in the commercial diving industry. We're going to talk a little bit about recreational diving, but I have to go into really what the commercial part was all about, because commercial divers had always used heavy gear hard hats, free flow helmets primarily. And today they even still use them. It's real common. But the demand mode helmets worked their way slowly into it. And basically, Bev Morgan was probably the spearhead on the demand mode, because he made lightweight full face masks that had a demand regulator almost identical to a second stage scuba regulator. The only difference, that's it right there, there's the band mask. The only difference with the band mask was it was real lightweight. You could use the same umbilical that you used with your heavy gear, and you had a bias adjustment, that dial of breath on the side. So as the diver went down, he would back that out to make it easier to breathe, because the compressor always put out basically the same amount of gas. It would pump the volume tank up, and then you breathe the volume tank down and kick back on. So what started all this was Bev Morgan was making these lightweight masks originally for abalone diving, California, and then he was an oil field diver off of Santa Barbara and Ventura in that area. And one day a tugboat pulled up and got a line caught in propeller. And normally they would put a heavy gear diver down, clear the line. Well, the heavy gear diver was on the bottom. So they said, "Hey, Morgan, can you clear that? Will that work?" He jumped in with the band mask, had it done in about 10 minutes. Next day, it happened again. After that, everybody started looking at that band mask and said, "Hey, Morgan, how deep can you dive that?" He says, "Just as deep as that helmet." So it took off. And so the rest is history. Kirby Morgan has been making helmets, and probably 90% of the world commercial diving right now uses Kirby Morgan helmets. Anyway, but that's not to sell this short. The helmet to the left there was widely used throughout the Gulf of Mexico primarily. And the helmet to the right, the Savoy, that was actually a demand mode version. That was a free flow helmet, and it turned into a demand mode belt. So these are some of the early ones. And then, of course,
the one on the left, Mike?
the one on the left is the Miller helmet. I'm sorry. Yeah. The Miller helmet was, it's a legend in the Gulf of Mexico. It's a
That was a Miller 400.
Miller 400.
That's what that got specifically. That's what I did.
And there's still people diving them out there and loving them. And actually, Kirby Morgan bought Miller after Ben Miller died and tried to duplicate what Ben Miller did in a modern version. And it was just too expensive to do. Ben used to make all those helmets. He made them by hand, every one of them, one off. So they're really coveted in the commercial diving industry. And the Savoy to the right is also very coveted. He was way ahead of his time. It was a two-piece helmet that was actually pressed and then welded together. Anyway, so in 1975, real quick about the band mask. The band mask, Bev Morgan and Bob Kirby were selling band masks to the Navy. And the Navy decided they wanted to buy a bunch of them. So they copied the drawing. They made drawings of all the parts because these were one-offs. And then the Navy went out for bids to have companies make the Kirby Morgan band mask. And of course, Bev Morgan, that didn't go over real big with Bev and Bob Kirby. So they went to Washington, D.C. and complained to McNamara. This was back in the early 70s. And he said, "Hey, kid, you guys didn't do your homework. You got no patents." So basically, that was that. Morris Diving started making the band mask. And so U.S. divers came to Bev and said, "Hey, let us buy you out. We're a big, strong company and we can handle this." So he sold the band mask rights to U.S. divers. And then to the right, you see the Superlight 17. Well, Bev already had it in his mind that he was going to make a nice helmet. And it turned out to be the Superlight 17, which changed everything. And that was 1975. So many years later, he actually bought the band mask rights back from Aqualung. And he still make them today. So, but anyway, a little history there. Bev Morgan started out as a lifeguard. He worked at Scripps University as a waterman. He was a lifeguard in Los Angeles. And him and the Maestro brothers, Bob and Billy Maestro, started the dive shop Dive and Surf, which later turned into the world famous Body Glove. And it was actually Bev that started the wetsuit part of it. And he was so overwhelmed with wetsuit orders that he hired a bunch of old ladies to do the sewing, glued them all together. And it got so crazy with the business, he couldn't keep up with it. So he ended up talking Bob and Billy into buying him out. And he took off to the Pacific and ended up writing articles for Skin Diver magazine for a couple of years and traveled all around. And anyway, he came back and him and Bob Kirby got together and they started doing what they're doing. I'm not going to go into great detail there, but it's quite a history. And there's a lot of information on that. And of course, the maestros and Body Glove. But I was lucky enough to meet Bev Morgan. I was doing my last tour of duty. I had done 3 tours of duty at the experimental diving unit over about a 15-year period. So I left EDU in the late 70s and went out to Submarine Development Group Detachment Mare Island and was out there for 5 years. Came back to EDU again because there wasn't a lot of places for a saturation diver to go. And came back again, and I love Panama City, so that's where I wanted to be. I came back again and I worked in unmanned testing. And so I got a lot of experience with testing diving equipment from the unmanned side, as well as, of course, being a guinea pig on the manned side. So left again for 3 years, came back, and in 1990, I met Bev Morgan while I was back at EDU. And anyway, the Navy had bought them what they called the Mark 21, which was a version of the Superlight 17. And there were a few issues. And so they had Bev Morgan come down to EDU, and we got talking about all the problems the Navy was having with it because they weren't used to diving the helmet, the man mode helmet. One thing led to another. We got to be friends, and he came over for dinner, and we talked. And as time went on, before I knew it, I was working part-time for Kirby Morgan right after I retired from the Navy, which was 92. So it was 91 I met Bev. 92 I retired, and it was during that time I retired that he kept contacting me and wanted me to come work for him. So I did part-time a little bit, but I was also working as a government contractor, and that took a lot of work. As government contractor doing in support of a lot of Navy diving programs there in Panama City. So one thing led to another. Next thing I know, I'm working 2 full-time jobs. I worked that job during the day and Kirby Morgan at night. So, and that picture there to the left is a breathing machine that Bev Morgan sent out to me. I guess we could kind of call that the start of Dive Lab, because I set up that breathing machine in the garage and we were building a small pure oxygen rebreather, or prototyping a small pure oxygen rebreather for the submarine escape program. And that to the right, you can see that's part of the rest of my garage. You can't see the breathing machine there because it's off to the left, but it was cluttered up with all kinds of stuff, and we were working on masks and whatever. So, but anyway, that's kind of how I got started with the Dive Lab thing. Working for Kirby Morgan in Panama City, and we put together, it was Kirby Morgan, Florida, and then it turned into Bev coined the name Dive Lab. And Bev says, I want to have a test facility that I can do research and development on our equipment and come up with new equipment and work on old equipment to make it better. So it starts out as we are a non-government, for-profit company, small business, and it's owned by Connie Morgan, Bev's daughter. So as time went on, the whole idea was continuous improvement and development of Kirby Morgan diving equipment, provide support to the commercial, military, scientific, and law enforcement diving safety groups out there. And in the very beginning, it was primarily military, and then got more into the commercial, and started going to, I think 1996 was the first ADCI show I went to, and started meeting everybody over in New Orleans. And then we started working quite a bit with the commercial guys. So now we do a lot with, of course, the military. We do a lot with the commercial, and I'm going to get into that a little bit more here in a minute. But it's really grown. So that's primarily what our mission is. Now, everything we do is primarily for Kirby Morgan or in support of Kirby Morgan, but we also do other things for other companies, providing we have the time. So we're located in Panama City, Florida. We're only about a mile, maybe a mile and a quarter as crow flies from the Gulf of America now, right? And about a mile from Walmart, where if anybody knows Panama City, they know where we're. But and it started out. We got 5 acres. It started out with 1 building, and we built 3 more buildings. So we got a lot of space now, a lot to maintain. We got a small pond in the back, and we don't use it that much as a test pond, but on occasion we do. We're also located pretty close to some clean, clear water springs within an hour away. So a lot of the testing we do, we primarily do in the Gulf, but if depending upon the winter or whatever, we'll go up to the springs and get nice clean water. This is just a picture here I show. This is the new diamond helmet that Kirby Morgan came out with. This was about 4 years ago. I was over in Venice, Italy, and the Italians were doing a cleanup of in Venice of the canals. So it was really a publicity thing. Our dealer wanted to show off the new diamond helmet. And we had all kinds of magazines from all over Europe, and they shot all kinds of pictures. I actually took that picture there with my phone. And you ought to see the stuff they pulled out of there.
Yeah.
Pretty
Mike,
gnarly.
what's the diamond helmet do? How's
Well,
it
that-
different from the other?
Okay, so the diamond, and I was going to get into that here in a little bit, but the
Oh,
diamond
sorry.
helmet, no, that's fine. The diamond helmet is a stainless steel Kirby Morgan helmet, and it, instead of the exhaust bubbles going into the water, they go in another hose and go to the surface. So the diver breathes the helmet just like he would breathe a normal helmet. And when he exhales, it goes up a hose and it just exhausts topside. So basically, with the diver wearing a complete dry suit, with his hands covered, everything's sealed, you're not bubbling into the water, so there's no chance of water getting in the exhaust system. You still have an open circuit exhaust for emergency, but it all goes up the hose. So the nice thing about that is if you were diving in jet fuel or something really bad, you could monitor the exhaust gas coming from the diver to make sure he's not getting contaminated. But the diamond is relatively new as far as that goes. People haven't caught on to it yet. The guys doing really dirty diving still dive with the stuff they dive. But it is used a lot for saturation diving. So it's caught on real big in the saturation world where they have to reclaim the helium. So as the diver breathes, that second umbilical brings it to the bell, and then from the bell, it goes all the way topside to the mothership, gets reprocessed. So the helium gets scrubbed to CO2, adds a little oxygen, goes back in the bank, and eventually the diver's going to be rebreathing. That's basically how the diamond works. So I was talking about military. You see here, we do, I say we, Kirby Morgan also makes full face masks. They make a variety of full face masks, and they're pretty state of the art. They're made to work with rebreathers, open circuit scuba, recreational scuba, and in this particular mask to the left is a heavier duty version, full face mask that you can bolt things to the top of it. It also has an integrated hood that goes on it. So you can stay nice and toasty warm if you got to dive in cold water. And the hood comes off really quick if you need to take it off. So, and then the other thing that we do at Dive Lab, we do make products, and I'll show you some of those products in a little bit, but we came up with what we call the Extreme Lightweight Dive System, which is basically a heavy gear deep sea diving setup, like what we have with a normal Kirby Morgan helmet. You would use it for diving deep, but it's a lightweight version. In other words, we call it extreme lightweight because the Army had missions where they needed to fly away really quick, and they need to be able to put everything in a helicopter. So this is an entire deep sea diving system that can go to 190 feet that you can put in a helicopter and you can fly away. And you basically have the same type of diving that you're doing with normal heavy gear. The main difference is the umbilical is real lightweight, and we throw a lot of high-tech stuff into it. It actually has an intermediate compensating system on the side that allows, and we send 350 pounds down to the diver. It's re-regulated, and as the diver is exhaling, that cylinder is filling back up for the next breath. So it works really quick. The Army has 15 systems. The FBI has 5 or 6 systems, and we have a lot of them out there. Public safety divers, Florida Marine Patrol has got 3 systems. All in all, I think we got 60 some odd systems out there. Coast Guard uses it. US Army. And it's been really successful. So there's some law enforcement pictures, as you can see. They're diving stainless helmets. In fact, that's I believe that's Florida Marine Patrol right there. And there's more in Rochester, New York Police Department. They have a system. Tampa Police has a system, so they're out there. There's the Vermont State Police diving in a quarry up in Vermont in the wintertime. That's a tent to the right. They put all their gear in the tent, run a little heater. There's the FBI diving up in Vermont. That was about close to the same time. So they cut a big hole in the ice.
Wow.
And the FBI's got 5 dive teams, and they're primarily they're actually agents. They have to get in the water to recover the evidence. So you have to have a trained agent to do that kind of stuff. So they actually take people that volunteer. They're already scuba divers. They get trained up to surface supply diving. So if they have to dive surface supply, they can. And but that's kind of chilly up there. And this is another fun one here. So one of the other things that Dive Lab does is we're a shell answer. We get a lot of calls, a lot of questions on a lot of different things. So I got this really cool phone call one time from Mythbusters. And they said, well, we heard this myth about if a hard hat diver loses if the umbilical gets cut to a hard hat diver on the surface, and somehow his one-way valve on the helmet doesn't work, that he gets sucked up into the helmet, like squeezing a tube of toothpaste. And they said, we figured we'd call Dive Lab and ask if that could possibly be true. And I said, oh yeah, sure, that'll happen. Well, they didn't believe me. So I said, well, think about it for a minute. That hose goes all the way to the surface, and if you're deep, even 50 feet would kill a diver. Because 50 feet, you'd have 25 pounds per square inch of pressure on that suit. The suit is attached to the helmet. Everything is dry. So as soon as you lost gas, all that gas going up the umbilical would take all the air out of the suit, and it basically tries to force the diver up into the helmet. Well, they still had a hard time believing it. So I said, hey, make up a little model of a person and put a helmet on it. And they actually did a really good job. If you haven't seen that episode on Mythbusters, it's really worth watching. So they did that. They did an experiment. I think they went to a big pool at the zoo there in San Francisco, and they made it up and they put it in the water, and then they unhooked the hose topside while the little model was at depth. And sure enough, it pushed the guy up into the helmet. And they called me up. Okay, you got us convinced. Now we want to really do this. So I really wanted to go. So anyway, I ended up flying out there, and I spent a day with them, and I went through all the stuff with them, and they were excited about it. And then about a month later, they called me up and they say, hey, we're ready to do this. And we're going to do it here in Northern California on the coast and Monterey. Well, it just so happens I had to go to Scotland, and I was gone. I said, I'm not going to be able to make it. I said, but please keep me posted. So the day I landed at the airport, I get this call, and she said, oh, it worked just like you said. And then they sent me some pictures and a video. And so the picture you see to the left is Meat Man. And I told them, I said, what you got to do is make up, but you can't go get a cadaver. They're not going to give you a cadaver. But go get a bunch of, and these guys are unbelievable, the Mythbusters, what they could do. I mean, the assets they have, it was a blast being there. But anyway, they went ahead and put together a Meat Man. And I said, whatever you do, put lungs in it, put blood in there, and put some kind of a head on it, and get it all in the suit. So if you haven't seen it, you got to watch it. It's good. You can find it on YouTube. The whole one is really good. I'm in the very beginning with the two gals there. And I do a lead in about the deep sea diving suit. So anyway, they went out there, and sure enough, they disconnected the hose, and you see it, and they're hollering and hollering, and next thing you know, the suits get smaller and smaller. Then all of a sudden, you see things moving up into the helmet, and then all of a sudden, big shot of blood, and all this stuff comes out. And of course, there's the teeth. They couldn't have been much better. But then to top that, all the air is gone in the suit and show you the pressure. They were at 275 feet of depth. They had an ROV filming it. Then all of a sudden the helmet collapsed. So if you haven't seen it, you'll see it. The helmet collapses and you see the rust go off into the water, the corrosion go off into the water. And if that wasn't so bad, I took that picture right there of the skull in the helmet, and I had it as a desktop on my phone. And I had to go over to Germany and meet with the Germans, the German Navy. And we were in an old World War II German building from back in the war. And I didn't know any better. And I flipped up the laptop. I was doing a presentation on equipment for the German Navy. And here's the meat man all shoved up in the helmet. They got really upset. They said the guys just had to come back from boating. It was a ship sunk or whatever, and they had to pull bodies off. Anyway, they asked me to take it off, so I had to change pictures really fast. But it's not real. I mean, that's what could happen. So anyway, sneak peek inside Dive Lab. We got a lot of stuff at Dive Lab, and you know, we have our own machine shop because a lot of what we do, we have to make a lot of fittings and equipment to do what we do. So we're always working with Kirby Morgan. They have a big machine shop, and they do 3D printing, and they do molding, they do all kinds of stuff. But if you look to the left there, that's our high bay. We keep the boat out there. This is my building. This is where I hide. And that building all belongs to me. I'm in there. But we have our air supplies out there, our mixed gas. We used to do a lot of mixed gas helium stuff. We don't do so much anymore because we can equate it to air. So we can save a lot of money by not using helium. We have compressors. And if you look to the right there, that's our, or to the middle, that's the test room. I think there's a few more pictures in here. We can test down to 660 feet, 200 meters. Machine shop. There we have 2 CNC mills, 2 CNC lathes, and I know how to turn them off. I don't know how to turn them on. My oldest son does all the machining. He's really good at it. I can run the old ones, but I can't run the new CNC stuff. So we make a lot of specialty equipment. You see those brass manifolds. Those are our XLDS manifolds that we make for our surface supply system. And all kinds of parts. We make a lot of stuff for the Navy. You know, we're not doing huge quantities, you know, maybe anywhere from 50, maybe 200 or 300. I think my son just made 400 rebreather ends for the Kirby Morgan rebreather mask for one of the navies overseas. And we make a lot of fittings. You know, we make our own barbs, fittings for our hoses, just because they weren't quite what we wanted, so we just make them ourselves. And we're not selling that many to where it makes it a lot easier for us to do it ourselves. And then we do other specialty equipment. That console you see there, that's a flow stand. It does flow and pressure readings for the Mark 16 rebreather that the Navy uses. So we came up with that. They bought a few of them from us because they didn't have any way for the guys out there doing their maintenance. All the way over to the right there, you see that's an XLDS system. I think I got some better pictures here, but that's a 3-diver control console with a 2-diver. It doesn't show it, does it? Here, I'm sorry. All right, so that's a 3-diver XLDS console. That's what we use for surface supply diving. And it's got a communication box in it. Basically, you plug the umbilicals on it and away you go. We also make a pure oxygen system that hooks up to it so the divers can decompress on pure oxygen in the water. A 2-diver in the middle. And then over to the right, that's a system we made for the diamond helmet. Remember, I talked before about all the gas comes topside. Well, the beauty of the diamond system, nobody else has done this, and we make everything there at Dive Lab. We came up with a nice little simple back pressure regulator. It's real quiet, and you can actually monitor the gas coming up from the diver. And as long as you know what his depth is, you can look at this and you can determine what his breathing rate is based on the flow meter. Okay, so it's real simple. And then it also allows us to, as we get deeper with the system, once we get deeper in about 100 feet, the exhaust is so strong that it actually wants to hold that diaphragm down. So we start applying a slight back pressure to the system to fool the helmet into thinking it's not as deep as it is. And we use that back pressure system all the way down to 190 feet. on air. So it's really worked out well. And there's not a lot of these out. The Navy has 8 of these systems, and I think there's 2 or 3 more out there. Here's some more stuff we make: manifolds, specialty manifolds. That one all the way to the left is a standalone high pressure supply system that can be hooked up to a low pressure compressor system to work as a backup or a secondary source. And then we got these bare manifolds right there. We machine those up just like you're seeing, all bare, and then we put valves in them, and it ends up like the one on the right there. That's a mixed gas rebreather setup for blending gas for the rebreather. There's a charging panel to the left that we made for the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard, all the Coast Guard units have those charging panels that we made for them. To the right is a complete XLDS 3-diver system, and then to the bottom left is an umbilical test setup that we make, so divers can test their own umbilicals. You can use it with water, you can use it with air. And then to the right there, you see that's a gauge comparator that we make so that commercial divers, military divers can actually do gauge comparisons, real accurate gauge comparisons, without having to remove the gauges from the system. We supply all the fittings and everything. They can actually test their gauges in place, so they don't have to remove them and send them anywhere. They just do it themselves. And we've got quite a few of those out there. Most of the Army units have them, Coast Guard and a few others, and commercial guys. Another thing that we do at Dive Lab is the Kirby Morgan training. We set up the training way back in 2000, and all the Kirby Morgan dealers come to Dive Lab, get trained in the maintenance or repair of Kirby Morgan equipment. And then we also open that up to all the commercial divers, military divers, basically anybody that does any type of commercial diving can come and take the repair course. And then those same people, once they've taken the repair course, can also teach Kirby Morgan operator user course on the Kirby Morgan equipment. So that's a big thing for the industry, because in the past, a lot of the guys, back when I first started in 2000 with this course, people were diving the helmets the way they thought they were supposed to be used. And the schools were teaching the helmets the way they thought it all worked. Not necessarily the way it was really intended, but the way it worked. So that training program's really turned into quite a full-time job at Dive Lab. And then, of course, we still have legacy support. All the old diving equipment Kirby Morgan made, as long as it can be supported, we help with that. And here, that gives you a typical view. We have probably no less than 35, 40 helmets at any time at Dive Lab being refurbished, being repaired. And we teach all the fiberglass as well. We teach select dealers worldwide how to do the fiberglass repairs. And now that the stainless steel helmets are coming online, a lot of people are buying more and more of the stainless because it's a lot easier to maintain than the fiberglass. So even with this, I mean, diving hasn't changed a whole lot. I mean, since the demand mode systems have come in, even the free flow systems that are still out there, it's amazing how divers don't want to give up what they've got. Now you can see too just how forgiving, or I should say forgiving, the helmets are. It's amazing how bad a shape a helmet can be in and still function. And it amazes me sometimes when we see some of these helmets that are being dove in the shape that they are in. They shouldn't be dove. But that's changed a lot. In the past 20 years, we've seen giant changes in the industry. And this is worldwide. I mean, it's not just here in the States. Commercial diving is hard. It's hard on equipment. It's hard on divers. So, but the research and development, like I said, that goes on and on. We're always working on things. It just never have enough time. Let me back up here. So there's another little view of our test room. And our test system, I got to give a lot of credit to Ansty. Ansty is a company over in the UK that I'll go back a little bit in my history. When I first got to EDU as a young diver in the 1970s, EDU didn't really have any way to do unmanned testing. In other words, with breathing machines. And I would look at the breathing machines they had, which were these old Reimers, small Reimers machine, which were state of the art at the time. But what really changed everything was the computers. Hewlett-Packard came out with a computer that people could buy, and EDU had state-of-the-art computers. And I'm looking at it in the 70s. I didn't understand computers at all. Didn't even barely knew how to turn it on. But that slowly got interfaced. So when I got back, I left the EDU in 79 and I came back in 1980, the end of 84. I came back and they put me in unmanned testing. And I'm looking at all this stuff. And unmanned testing at EDU at the time, the experimental diving facility, wasn't really up and running yet. It was right at the stage. So I was in on the ground floor of when it started. And we're using chart plotters instead of computer screens. But the computer was gathering the data. And none of the breathing machines and none of the programs were fast enough to record the data that we needed to record. Well, EDU blundered through it and they came up with some pretty cool stuff. Well, they worked also with other militaries, like over in the UK, the Ministry of Defense, and some really smart people. And there was a guy over there by the name of Ian Hemmings, and he had some really good ideas on breathing simulators. And he finally decided to leave MOD and he went on his own. And him and another fellow by the name of Stan Ellis started a company called Ansty. And they built state-of-the-art breathing simulators that were interfaced with computers that could see things that we never saw before. And instead of using a chart plotter with a pen, it actually used a computer screen. Now, the data that was taken back in the old days when we breathed equipment was so slow, you couldn't really see what was going on. Well, now with this new computer system, he's taking 10,000 samples every second and then can average those 50, 100, or 150 times. So what we see now on the breathing machine, the loops, we can pick out everything that's going on with the breathing. So with scuba regulate, with diving helmets, full face masks, rebreathers, scuba regulators, all this stuff, even firefighting equipment and mine rescue equipment, we test a lot of that equipment at EDU. And the breathing simulator, it's state of the art. Like I said, we can see things that we never saw back in the 70s and 80s. And anyway, there's probably more of those ANSI breathing machines in the world now than there is of any other time. We also have test tank, of course, but our main thing that we're doing all the time is we're on the breathing machine. We'll take the equipment off, we jump in the test tank, and we try to duplicate what we saw, shell. And then when we're happy, we finally go out and we get in the water with it out and go. We go a little deeper. And here again, like I said, the testing is both manned and unmanned testing, but and of course, never ending testing. Now, the one big thing that I want to mention is if you look to the right there, that helmet, that's got a rebreather pod. That same rebreather pod goes on that mask. So this was something we were fooling with and the Navy was fooling with. And you never know what you might see next. But in a nutshell, what we do with this breathing performance, if you look to the left there, the respiration chart, that comes out of the U.S. Navy Dive Manual. It gives you an idea when you're breathing underwater. Well, when we breathe right here, your breathing rate is determined by the number of breaths you take and how deep of a breath you take. So let's say you take a 2-liter breath, which is a pretty good sized breath. Picture a 2-liter Coke bottle. Okay, you take 10 of those breaths or take 20 of those breaths in a minute, that's 40 RMB. 40 RMB is a pretty heavy work rate. Okay, well, the U.S. Navy, if you look at that chart, I think you can see it pretty good there. You have resting, you have light work, moderate work, heavy work, and severe work. And then actually above severe is extreme, which is ridiculous. Now, the U.S. Navy is really the one that put this all together originally. And it's called respiratory minute volume. A lot of people are thinking of airflow, but respiratory minute volume is nothing more than your breathing rate and the volume. So to the left here is your breathing loop. You see the straight line. That straight line right in the middle, everything below that is a negative pressure. Everything above that is a positive pressure. Well, the computer records all that. it takes that volume average pressure and converts it to work. And it basically tells you how hard it is to breathe what you're breathing. Okay. So in this particular case here, the item was, it was a scuba regulator. It was being dove to 131 feet on the breathing machine. And if you look, it says it EXT work of breathing, 1.18 joules. That's pretty good because it was 75 liters a minute. That's a really heavy work rate. None of us here could do 75 liters a minute very long. Now in Europe, to qualify commercial diving equipment in Europe, you have to test it at 75 liters a minute. US Navy requires 62.5. That's a high work rate. And then as far as scuba regulators go in Europe, it's a max depth of 164 feet, which is 50 meters. And there's different parameter settings for that. But anyway, so that's basically what we're doing the most is this type of testing most of the time on all the equipment and variations of it. Then there's other tests that we have to do. This is hot storage testing. So we do different hot tests that we're required to do where the equipment gets put in a hot locker, gets heated up to 70 degrees centigrade, up to 170 degrees Fahrenheit, left in there for at least 3 hours, charged to half the rated working pressure. We bring it out and it goes on the breathing machine. You got to breathe it. And then we have to do the same. We do 2 different hot tests. We do 2 different cold tests. So we have to freeze it at minus 30. Centigrade. And same thing, we beat it all up. When you get all done with the wearing test, then we have to do the rest of the performance testing, and it all has to meet the requirements, or you can't sell it in Europe. So that's basically what it takes to get through the European testing. And of course, we do gauges, diving computers. They go through the same beat up, hot, cold testing, and then they get tested for accuracy. And the other thing that we do a lot of is cold water testing. In this case here, you see, we try to do all the testing of the Kirby Martin equipment right at 1 degree. We've gone as cold as 28 degrees Fahrenheit, but typically we're right at 1 degree centigrade is what we do. It's hard for us to go much colder than that without using salt. I don't like to use salt because it makes a mess out of everything. So a lot of regulator freeze testing we've done. And then other tests we have to do like field of vision. That's called an apparometer. That's a European requirement. Make sure you can see. So we have to chart what the visual, what the diver can see. Okay, it has to fall within parameters that they have over in Europe. We don't have that here in the U.S. and it's not the most important thing, especially for commercial divers, because half the time they can't see underwater anyway. But we use a laser. That little line you see there, we use a laser to get everything calibrated and lined up, and then we take the reading, turn all the lights off, and light up one eye at a time and take the readings. And that's a homemade apparometer I made myself, but it's pretty accurate. Another thing we have to do is hydrostatic imbalance testing, and this is stuff we have to do for the European testing, but we basically do it on a lot of other equipment. So all the Kirby Morgan helmets go through the pitch and roll testing, where you have to breathe it 62.5 liters a minute while we go through all these different attitudes. And we have to record the work of breathing and its parameters as needed. Rebreathers have to be tested the same way for the European standard. There's a lot of this that the US Navy does not do, but it's required in Europe. A lot of work. And there's other testing we've done. As you can see, rebreathers, which I avoid like the plague if I can, because it's a lot of long testing. Rebreather testing requires just over and over, and it requires a number of tests that you have to keep repeating. But we've done snorkel testing. You see the snorkel masks, right? Okay, we've tested a lot of snorkel masks. And I don't know how I ever got into it, but we did it kind of just because we do so much work with CO2. We learned from the snorkel masks that, most of these snorkel masks are really high in CO2. I think that pink one in the middle was the lowest one I've ever tested. It actually passes. But avoid them if you can. I don't think stick with the old snorkel. You see the old snorkel right down there. Okay, that actually does really well. So stick with a snorkel and a mask.
Mike, what is that helmet on the right?
Helmet on the right. Oh, okay, that's Sphere helmet. That was, you remember the movie Sphere?
Yeah.
Kirby Morgan made that helmet. That's Trent Schultz, the guy in the helmet. And that was really cool, the Sphere helmet. The movie was okay, but I thought the helmet was really cool. I dove that helmet quite a bit.
It looks like it's got a demand regulator.
It
but
does.
No mouthpiece and no,
No mouthpiece. Oh, no, it's movies. You can't have something getting away. Not only that, but it had a light inside, so it lit up your face. Just like the Abyss, you know. All that was. Oh, yeah.
but did they free flow that?
You could free flow it, but no, actually, when you watch the movie, it was a pretty cool regulator. What people don't realize is we learned a lot from that. Trent Schultz is the one that put that together. He did a great job, but the regulator had a cover over it, okay, and the cover kept air around the diaphragm. So as you breathe, you saw the cover move, okay. So it dampened the diaphragm. It actually made the performance really good. Now they did have an oral nasal that you could flip up. You know, when because we didn't want the CO2 to be really high, but I don't think anybody ever used it. They just dove it. They would flush it out every once in a while.
But he could cause enough vacuum in the helmet?
Oh, yeah. Sure. Yeah. Yeah, it was a real sensitive regulator. That regulator and a lot of the components in that regulator went into production later on in some of the other stuff.
Cool looking helmet.
Yeah, they made a number of them. There's scuba hose to the left. So that's a 225 pound, I think it is, weight. That's what another European test. So we have to take these scuba hoses, and that's a forklift, hook it up. You know, it's easier to put a bunch of weight on there. We weigh all the weight, come up with what the weight is, go a couple pounds extra maybe. And then there you go, you hook up your scuba hose. And it's funny, that particular hose there, I lifted, held it, we had to hold it for 10 seconds, held it for 10 seconds and set it back down. Then I thought, you know what, I'm just curious because we have other tests we have to do. But that's a destructive test. You throw the hose away. I took the hose afterward, filled it with water, and pressurized it to over 4 times its working pressure. It finally burst. I think it was somewhere around 1,300 psi it burst. That's pretty good hose. The item you see to the right is a aircraft escape device. So that's become real big in especially in the militaries. Any helicopters, airplanes flying over water, you got to have one of those for every crewman. And that way, if the plane goes down in the water, you pop it in your mouth, you activate it, and it gives you a chance. You know, people have actually escaped from over 60 feet with these things. So that's a requirement. And we've done a lot of testing on those. Same thing, they have to go through all this European cold water testing and everything else. Testing and development. Here again, all this test equipment you see, we make at Dive Lab. And we actually made what the U.S. Navy uses right now at the Experimental Diving Unit. They have one of our mannequins. They've got a number of our test heads. And we had to do it. We had to make them ourselves just because it's not something you can go buy. The originals we had were from Ansty, but we had to make some stuff to we could do other things. So that shows you kind of breakdown. There's in the middle is the throat. To the left is the fiberglass shell, and then it all gets put together. We fill it with silicone, and you can see a little bit better here. There's a mold down the bottom. It took me about 2 weeks to make that mold, and I'm not very good at it. But there's a lot of little things. You see that regulator to the upper left. You see the white there. Well, that was a brand new regulator to be tested, but it didn't. The exhaust valves didn't seal, so you don't get very far when the exhaust valves don't seal. So all the way over to the right, there's a test mannequin head, and you see that all the way, the little tube in the mouth. That's where we're drawing a sample for CO2. So it gets involved. This is over at the Neutral Buoyancy Laboratory over in Houston, Texas. They got a whole space station set up in the pool. And the astronauts get in the water, and they do their training in the water, and that was pretty cool. We went over there and with a diamond helmet with a return line system so they could try not blowing any bubbles in the water and see how that worked. And if you notice, the eyes lit up in the helmet. That's a sonar system called the David system. And it's pretty state of the art. In fact, they used it on that big bridge collapse up in Maryland. And basically, they put a system down on the bottom that's mapping all the time. It's an underwater sonar. And it can pick up everything that's down there and transmits it back up topside, which goes back down to the diver. So no matter where the diver goes, it's oh, he's seeing what's down there. Gives him eyes. And they use that extensively there. It's pretty cool. And lastly, we got a lot of critters at Dive Lab. That was that's our big bird. He eats like every day. You got to feed him or go out there and throw some bread in the water so he can get fish. And then we got a lot of fish. That's one of our gators. He disappeared about a year ago. We had a lot of rain and he swam under the fence and I haven't seen him.
Looks like you overfed him.
Well, you never know. And then that's Bobette. It's actually a female bobcat. And in fact, she just got fed tonight. She's been hanging out for quite a while there. And the cat to the right's watching YouTube. That's our test cat. He lives in the test room. And then of course, there's the older cat's no longer with us. He was 18. And then the little soft-shell turtle. We got a ton of turtles in the pond. And there's some of the other critters. We even had a black bear all the way down to the left.
Wow.
He hung around for a month, but we did not feed him. But he would constantly assault the bird feeders. So, any questions?
That was the glasses that, going back to the safety, is that technology similar to the glasses that you can wear?
Yeah.
That gives you like data that,
Oh yeah, it's real simple. Except you're looking in the glasses just like this, and you're actually seeing. It's like watching a video.
Whenever
But you can,
when we have a question in the audience, because the people on Zoom can't hear it, if you could repeat the question
Oh,
and then
sure.
answer it, that would be helpful.
yeah, those glasses that used on the sonar system, the David system. You notice the glow. The glow is actually what the person is seeing. It's an image. So yeah, it works like that, and it's really you can actually look beyond it, so you can still see what's going on, but you're looking at everywhere you move. It's just like a TV monitor right in your eyes. It's and it I won't say it's a perfect picture. It actually looks more like a drawing and highlighted. It highlights all the things. Like you would walk up to that wheel, you would see the highlight of the wheel. You wouldn't necessarily get all the detail, but you see the highlight of the wheel. So the diver can actually walk along without tripping over anything, swim along. He can see everything that the sonar is painting. Now, if that was behind something or something else behind it, you wouldn't see that. But it really, I guess it really works good for that particular thing, like the bridge work.
there's just image, not data.
Yeah, well, they can send data down too, and they can actually project drawings down there. So if somebody needs to look at a set of drawings, there's almost nothing they can't do with it. So, and it all has to do with, with the computers. I mean, with the computer stuff today. That's what's made the biggest change in diving and in testing. I look at it from the test standpoint because we've been doing this testing now for 25 years at Dive Lab. And I never realized how much I didn't know until I started working, with the ANSTI people, getting their breathing equipment and actually doing the type of thing. We were doing some tests that nobody's ever done before. And we didn't really know what we were doing, like sound testing. Everybody wants to stop the sound in the water from affecting the diver. Well, what they don't realize is sound travels 8 times faster in the water than it does in air. So the sound has already got to the cochlea in your ear, in your middle ear. It's already got there way before it hits the eardrums. So while it can affect the eardrums, it can affect a lot of other things. So you're not going to stop the sound in the water by putting things in the diver's ear. You might mitigate some of the air pressure, but you can't. Very difficult to put something in the diver's ear and then plug his ear up while you're underwater and make pressure changes. So that's real interesting because they're still trying to do it. And Kirby Morgan spent a lot of time. Well, Dive Lab spent a lot of time. Kirby Morgan spent a lot of money buying equipment so that we could do all this type of testing. And finally said, you know what? Go ahead, Navy, do your thing because they're still doing it and nothing's changed. So.
Any questions? Go ahead, John.
If you weren't selling your products overseas, how much testing would be eliminated?
Well, it would have been definitely different because it was the overseas that spurred a lot of this testing. There's a lot of the CE testing that has really made diving a lot safer. It's been great. Now, there's some of it I don't agree with and I complain about it, but the reality is overall, it's really made diving a lot safer, especially in the recreational field. You look at how good scuba regulators are today compared to the way they were in the early 70s or late 60s. I mean, there was absolutely no comparison. So they're real stringent. And commercial diving as well.
I have a couple questions from Zoom, and you don't need to repeat these because I'm right next to the microphone. One question was, what was your most memorable dive?
Most memorable. Well, I mean, from a happy standpoint, probably down here, dive with John, going out getting lobster. But no, there's a lot of I can't even begin. At Washington State, I did a lot of diving in Washington State. And you got to remember, I was also a YMCA PADI scuba instructor, so I was always diving. If I wasn't diving in the Navy, I was diving on my own because I enjoyed it, and always had a boat, still have a boat, and still get out and dive as much as I can. But the most memorable, there was a number of them. Probably one sat dive I made where the water was crystal clear, and it was just real memorable. We ran into an octopus at 400 feet and played with him in front of the video, and everybody thought it had me, thought it was going to get me. And I made all kinds of noise like I was they getting ready to deploy a standby diver. And then finally I let loose and the octopus let loose and he went off, but he was a big one. He was probably 80 pounds. But no, there's so many of them. Some ice diving I did years ago. And a lot of diving off Panama City, and we still dive. I mean, it's really hard to say the best one.
What about the scariest?
The scariest.
The scariest, I made a big mistake one time. A friend of mine lost his snowmobile in the lake, and without drowning, he was able to get back on the ice. And we were all sitting in a bar drinking beer. This is my early Navy days, and I was home for the weekend from New London, Connecticut. I lived in Massachusetts, and of course it was like January. And so we were going to go get a snowmobile that night. Big mistake. Went out there with a rowboat, telling these guys how to tend. I tied a line around me, jumped in the water with scuba. I hit the water. It's 29 degree, 30 degree water in Massachusetts. And as I was going down, I realized it was too heavy and I'm kicking. Of course, I have no communications, diving scuba, tied off. And then one of my fins came off.
Oh.
So then I'm kicking and thrashing with the other fin and that came off. And so I'm trying to get my weight belt off, and I finally got the weight belt off. At the same time, I reached up and I pulled my, wearing a little EDT vest, and I come to the surface and I'm being strangled, and I couldn't talk. I was so out of breath. And so they finally got me to the boat and pulled me up on the ice, and I said, "Hey, let's do this tomorrow." So that's what we did. And the next day, of course, hadn't been drinking any beer. Everything was good. I found my fins. I found everything. We found a snowmobile and pulled it out. But yeah, I learned a lot from that dive.
How'd you get the snowmobile out?
Oh, actually, it was where a brook came in, or water came in. So that part was thawed out. And all we did was tie a line, ran it all the way into the beach, hooked it to my buddy's Jeep, and slowly pulled it out. And I rode it out. I was sitting in it.
Did it still work?
Later, after they flushed it out.
This is a question from Gia, we're outside. She saw the picture of the diver in what appeared to be Venice, and she wanted to know what kind of diving you did they do in
I
Venice.
didn't do any of it. I just went over to actually work with our dealer on the helmet because it was brand. It wasn't even really out then. It was just coming out. And all I did was go over and just enjoyed the food and the wine, and it was actually pretty. It was a good experience because they brought in a lot of people, and several different people got to dive the helmet. So we were getting some feedback. But yeah, it's I was going to say I like to dive over there. I've dove over in the Med before, but I can skip Venice.
Dirty water?
Well, it was cold.
Cold.
It actually doesn't look dirty, but it's not
Mhm.
quite as clean as you'd think, yeah.
How long was that cleanup?
Well, it was a publicity thing. They actually went out later on and did more cleanup, not necessarily all the time. Although Kirby Morgan left it over there and let them use it. But they dive in there. Venice is kind of funny. They don't allow diving. You can't just dive in there, but unless you're police or whatever. But they've been slowly organizing and actually sponsors like the Kirby Morgan dealer over there, putting together a cleanup in area. They're pulling up whole shopping carts because there's no motor vehicles in Venice.
Yeah.
Everything's foot traffic, bicycles, lots of bicycles
Yeah.
in the water. Yeah.
Cheaper than when they drained the canals back in history to do a cleanup.
Yeah, well, you can't drain Venice.
No,
because-
no,
Yeah.
no, but they would drain.
And it's slowly creeping up.
Yeah.
A week after I left there, the hotel I was staying in had 5 feet of water. They had a big flood over there, you know, rain. It rained for like 5 days straight.
So a question on the engineering of all of this. It seems like if everything is, or a lot of the equipment is one-off, you all have to do all the engineering for the gas mixes or
Well,
the
yeah.
parts to it, the demand, the valves.
Well, typically what happens is Kirby Morgan, they're always working on stuff and they'll come and they'll say, hey, we're doing this, we're doing that. And then we work with them. But generally speaking, a lot of times I don't get to see some of the stuff. I used to go out there a lot, but not so much anymore. But they'll send us and they'll say, hey, we need you to do this, this, and this. And I do it. And then all of a sudden, a couple of weeks later, they send me the next version. Now, I'll give you an example, oral nasal masks. Kirby Morgan spent a tremendous amount of money trying to come up with perfect oral nasal masks to really keep CO2 down. And we just came out with a new oral nasal mask for the helmets. It's about 30% less, which is really, really good. And the biggest thing is comfort, because divers, if it's not comfortable, they don't want it.
All right. Anybody else have questions? Mike will be around. So we'll let people, if you are seeing this on Zoom or you see it later on a recording, go ahead and put a comment or a question in it because we do monitor that and we'll try to get back with you on an answer. If you're here at the museum and you have any questions, we'll be putting the chairs away and you can talk to Mike. We want to thank you. Mike's been a longtime member of the History of Diving Museum, but as a thank you for an Immerse Yourself presenter, we're extending it for a year. You can actually come here 362 days a year because we're closed 3. And we have a little goodie bag and a shirt for you to take back to Panama City and enjoy yourself. So thank you so much. We appreciate it. And these evenings are free and open to the public, but if you should decide to have some change in your pocket and want to make a donation on your way out, we have a donation helmet case. So we would appreciate if you would help us to continue offering this program for free. And thank you for being here tonight. And we look forward to seeing you next month.
Thank you.